Okay. Hi there, it's Denise Eckert, and I love coming on here and sharing different ideas and techniques to help you lower your stress and, in all senses, really help you avoid burnout. Now, today I've got Scott Anderson, and he's the author of You're Not Toast and the founder of Double Dare, a business coaching service helping high achieving professionals break free from burnout. With 30 years of business ownership, an ICF certification, and mental health therapy credentials, Scott guides clients through a proven process to reduce stress, scale businesses, and rediscover work passion. His approach blends business strategy with deep understanding of burnout's mental and emotional dimensions. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you, Denise. It's great to be here. I appreciate it.
Now, what inspired you to do this type of work of helping people take that burnout cycle and turn it into something a little more positive?
I was burnout myself. I went through a couple of cycles of burnout, but one in particular that was especially bad. And like a lot of my clients, I wondered whether I could even pull out of it. One of the hallmarks of burnout, I guess, is a feeling of complete exhaustion that you expect to wake up refreshed in the morning and instead you wake up exhausted. And this is what happened to me. And it happened enough mornings in a row that I began to really worry, boy, I don't know if I'll be able to go to work. One of these days, I'm not going to be able to answer the bell. And if I can't, this is going to really cause some problems in every area of my life. And that's a canary in the coal mine for most people with workplace burnout. The first thing that we notice is that kind of exhaustion and kind of the downstream fear that even if I can get to work, my fear is that I'm not going to be able to disguise how burned out I really am. And sooner or later, people are going to see what a mess I really am, how I'm just mailing it in. But it was personal burnout that got my own attention.
Now, you mentioned that fatigue was your biggest symptom or indicator of burnout. What are the other symptoms that people experience when they are dealing with burnout?
Yeah, that's a great question. The one that most people notice and most of our clients report when we first start talking to them is the exhaustion. But it's more than just physical exhaustion, it's complete mind, body, spirit exhaustion. We actually offer an online burnout assessment, which is really the best way to determine whether any of your listeners have burnout. I'll put that in the show notes. But it's a quick but science backed assessment of burnout symptoms. So, exhaustion is the one that most people notice. But there are several others that not everybody, we talk about burnout a lot, but the clinical definition isn't that well known. So some of the other symptoms are the feeling of being misunderstood or unappreciated at work, that you can't explain and they can't understand the pressure you're under, how in the weeds or underwater you are, whatever metaphor you want to use, that other people can't really appreciate that. And as burnout gets worse, there's this sense that there's a feeling of kind of cynicism about the workplace, either about our customers, our clients, our coworkers, our bosses, investors, shareholders, board of directors. For most people, there comes this sort of almost blaming them for the exhaustion that you're feeling, that you can't really explain what you're going through and they can't understand is one of the sensations. So one of the symptoms that most people don't recognize at first, but is very common, is a kind of a resentment feeling towards those around you. We treat burnout from a holistic perspective, not just at work, but at home and in all areas of life. But what a lot of people report at home is that their loved ones, their significant others, say things like, "You're with us, but you're not present. You're a zombie." And if you're hearing that at home, then you're in trouble. That's another hallmark. And a lot of our clients, I had a conversation with a client recently who said, it feels as though my life has become a choice between succeed at home or succeed at work. And I have to pick one. I can't have both. And that's the kind of, I don't know, impossible existential crisis that burnout can feel like.
Now, for someone that's listening to this and has an indication that they are in burnout or going into burnout, what are some of the first steps that they can do to help themselves?
Sure. One of the problems The good news and the bad news about burnout is this: most people cause their own burnout. It's hard to hear that at first, but unless you're in a situation where the workplace is truly toxic or completely unreasonable or racist or misogynistic or otherwise toxic, and that definitely occurs. If you're in a situation like that, then get out of it, run away screaming. But we find that's actually a very small percentage of the people that are burned out. Most people who are burned out are actually causing it themselves. And as hard as that is to hear, it makes sense when you think about the two main characteristics of burned out people. One of them is perfectionism and wanting to make everything absolutely perfect and being the go-to person. Typically, when there's a hard job to be done in a short amount of time with a lot of pressure, if they pick you, then you are likely, or you have a stronger probability of being burned out. The other characteristic is of having no or having poor boundaries, or in other words, not being able to say no very well. And a combination of perfectionism and perpetual overachievement combined with no boundaries really is a recipe for burnout. So one of the first things that you asked about, what can we do? If you are burned out, what can you do? And the answer, first of all, is to really understand what burnout really is, and to understand that even though we don't intend to do this to ourselves or our loved ones or our coworkers, it is actually, it's one of those things where our superpowers have turned to kryptonite. Early in our careers, when we're younger people and have very little experience, high achievement people compensate by working harder, trying harder, worrying more, trying to make it perfect, and never saying no. And early in our careers, we can compensate for lack of experience and be noticed and be rewarded and rise up the ranks faster than other people. The problem is that strategy does not scale very well. As we get older, acquire more things, if we have significant others or children in particular, much less more responsibility at work, that doesn't scale. It's not possible to overcome everything by working harder and worrying more. And the first thing to recognize is that most of us are causing our own burnout. And the second thing to recognize is that most of the things that we do to recover from burnout will actually not only not work, but will actually make it worse. It's like you've heard the expression, don't think about pink elephants, don't think about pink elephants. If you're trying to distract yourself, for example, from the stress you're under or the overwhelm you're feeling, either by flying into work, as a lot of burned out people do, we work that much harder, we worry that much more. That's the natural tendency for most burned out people. And that won't work. That'll make it worse. The other thing that won't work, unfortunately, is avoidance. So neither fight nor flight work. For example, I have a lot of clients who have taken a vacation or even taken a sabbatical. I have a client in Europe who took a 6-month sabbatical and returned to work every bit as much burned out as before. So the first step is really just to understand what burnout really is, that we're causing it ourselves, which is actually good news because it means that we can do something about it. Assuming you're not in a toxic environment, it means that if we caused it, we can also cure it. The problem is that all the things that come naturally to either fix it or avoid it won't work with burnout. Because back to the metaphor of don't think about pink elephants, your mind knows you're thinking about being overwhelmed. Your mind knows you're thinking about being exhausted. So the first thing we do is try to educate people about what's really going on and why all the skills that have worked in other areas of our life won't work with overcoming burnout. The next thing to understand is that the kind of recovery we do need, first and foremost, to recover our energy and our physical well-being. And that means interrupting a flight and fight cycle that most of us go through when we're stressed. Most people who are burned out think that they have to be perpetually hypervigilant. I do a lot of work with post-traumatic stress disorder. That's also a characteristic of PTSD. But to remain in a hypervigilant state is the way we have to be 24/7 to maintain our edge, succeed at work, and hopefully also succeed at home. The problem with that is that if our adrenaline and cortisol systems and our blood pressure and everything else are in high alert all the time, we will be exhausted. So we think I'll take a vacation or a sabbatical or a long weekend or I'll get a good night's sleep. But that's not how the adrenaline cortisol system recovers. And actually, one of the things that we have most of our clients do from the very beginning is a very simple technique of we call it the R&R technique, and I can put a link in the show notes if you want, but it's a very simple breathing exercise. It only takes 5 seconds. And the idea is to, first of all, just notice that you're stressed, find it in your body. And typically it's between the neck and the navel. There's some sort of stress. Find it, inhale deeply through your nose, exhale deeply through your mouth, and visualize the physical sensation that you notice leaving you, allowing the stress energy to just leave. And this sort of 5-second vacation, we call it a mini vacation. If you take a mini vacation 5 or 10 times a day, when you notice that you are stressed or disturbed, really is the beginning. It's not a complete solution, but it's very different than trying to pretend it's not happening or to work even harder and worry even more. If we stay in fight or flight, we will only make our burnout worse.
When I first started this podcast, I started interviewing people at the beginning, and it was incredible how sick people got from living in burnout so many years. And their health conditions were just right off the chart. It wasn't even something that could be diagnosed. It was someone's disc exploded in their back, organ shut down, and there was no rhyme or reason except living in that extreme stress. Now,
that's right.
Yeah, it's really,
and that's really when you look at the World Health Organization of what burnout really is, it's the effect of living in unrelieved stress. The truth is, though, however, is that most of us cause ourselves to be in perpetual stress because we think we have to do that in order to survive. It's very counterintuitive to think, how can I relax and even breathe for 5 seconds? That feels like the wheels will fall off the bus because I'm not being hypervigilant. I'm at risk. I'm at danger. And that's the hardest part of recovery. But fortunately, it's one of the fastest things that we can fix for our clients.
You can't beat that. How long does it take?
Yeah, 5 seconds. 5 seconds, 5 or 10 times a day is not a complete answer. A lot of it is having, and it really does take some courage to look at the feeling of being overwhelmed, because it is by definition overwhelming, and no one wants to look at that. It's scary. A lot of us, I certainly felt, if I get too close to that, it will be an abyss that will swallow me up. So I don't even want to look at it. It's too scary to even contemplate because it feels like the closer I get to it, the more likely I am that it'll swallow me up. And then I will be truly paralyzed. So the answer, though, is we would call it exposure therapy in the therapy world, is just to actually come into very gentle, brief contact with the overwhelm that you're feeling. Instead of avoiding it or trying to fix it, to actually be with it, if only for a few seconds. And as counterintuitive as that is, that really is the beginning of the solution.
I love that. So you talk a little bit about your burnout breakthrough method.
Yes.
What does that contain?
There's basically three phases to the process. And in fact, we just published a book, as you mentioned, called You're Not Toast. And if you go to burnoutbreakthrough.com, you can get it. It's $5, I think, in the US. I have no idea what tariffs are doing today. I hope nothing bad. But anyway, you can probably get around tariffs if you buy it from our website. And the You're Not Toast book is a complete guide exactly how to break through burnout. We've distilled all of the last 10 years of research and clinical experience with thousands of high achievers, and the book contains every step of the way. It basically breaks down into 3 pieces. The first part is to regain your energy and your physical health. In fact, one of the things we ask our clients to do first and foremost is to go to a doctor, because a lot of burned out people who are overachievers and won't take time haven't been to a doctor in a long time. That was especially true in COVID when it was impossible to see a doctor, but it's true even behind COVID that a lot of us just won't make time to do that. So the first phase is really to get your physical health back, and using techniques like the R&R technique is the beginning of that, to learn a way that you don't fight overwhelm and you don't avoid it, but we teach several different science-based ways to just be with it. And that really is the way to gradually regain energy, but also not to be so terrified by, and that's really what it comes down to, the pressure that you're under, to make it a friend, if you will. So that's the first chunk. The second chunk is, most of us have allowed the anxiety and or depression of stress to bully us into working way more hours than we should, or worrying way more than we should. So the second phase of our recovery process has to do with re-examining your own values And by values, we don't mean moral or ethical values as much as what makes life worth living to you? What are the two or three principles that you want to bet your life on, basically, that you want to be held accountable to? And what we teach in the second phase is to shift from being bullied by disturbing thoughts and feelings and reacting to those by working harder and worrying more, and instead to shift your basis for making decisions to your values, to the true north, we call the guiding principle system or GPS, so that you have a way of making decisions that isn't entirely in the service of how do I feel less anxious? And our answer is always work harder and worry more. But by looking at our values instead, we get to make decisions that are healthy and positive for us, for our coworkers, and for our loved ones. That's the second phase. And then the third phase has to do with recognizing that most of us have caused damage to ourselves and potentially to the people that we love most by being in burnout. And burnout is, in a way, an addiction. We work harder and worry more and generate the body and brain chemistry that we ultimately become addicted to. And it's not just all of the addictive substances that we hear about in the news. We have our own chemistry sets right inside our bodies, and we create adrenaline and dopamine and cortisol, et cetera. And we learn how to mix our own chemicals. And after a while, we become addicted to this sort of high alert, hypervigilant state. And in that state, our view of reality becomes a bit distorted. And we do things that, if we were feeling better, would seem insane to us. For example, working so hard that a disc explodes, or that we miss family events, or what have you. If we were giving advice to a friend, we would say that's crazy. But when we are in this sort of a form of self-delusion, it's hard. We can't really see the damage we're doing to ourselves and others. So the final phase is to understand the damage that we've done and to make it right again in our relationships. And first and foremost, with ourselves. We really do hurt ourselves a lot by believing the sort of myth that if we work harder and worry more, then I won't feel so uncomfortable. Then I won't feel so overwhelmed. I won't feel so stressed or anxious or depressed. As long as if I can just get all this work done. Of course, the work will never be done. And that's the lie we tell ourselves.
And also, when I was growing up in my younger days, is that the busier you were and the more stressed you were, the more successful you were.
Yes.
That was an indicator of success. And how has that changed for us? So, having that balance, which is really hard to do, that is where you gain the success.
Exactly. And that's the other part of looking at values is, what do you really value? Most of us have been willing to push all of our values across the table in the service of not even success anymore, but just to make stress go away or the overwhelm go away. And the only way that we knew to do that was to work harder and worry more. So the idea of introducing this guiding principle system, or GPS, is meant to help us understand that there's another way of looking at our lives, another way of making decisions. The other part is almost all of our clients are very high achieving people. Many own their own businesses or have high positions in their companies. And the fear is that question I mentioned earlier: I'll either succeed at work or succeed at home. But if I'm not burned out and I stop working and worrying so hard, then my business or my professional life is going to suffer. And our experience has been the opposite of that. And certainly my own personal experience. It's just that we have to start working in a way that scales and that makes sense. When we were in our 20s, it made sense maybe to work so many hours and to never say no to any kind of opportunity, let's call it. And that works really well for a while. But particularly as we grow companies or grow into high-performing positions, you can't scale yourself in the sense of just working harder and worrying more. There has to be strategy, there has to be systems, and we also have to make choices about what are we going to focus on. With a lot of our CEOs, we go through a process called Genius Zone assessment, and we ask them, what are the 2 or 3 things that you could do in a day that would move the needle farthest and fastest for your role and for your company? And typically that has to do with strategic planning, being the visionary of the business. Often it has to do with business development, for example. And then we ask people to do a time audit. We ask them how many hours a week do they spend in their Genius Zone doing those 3 things. And the answer is typically 0 or maybe an hour. And so I asked them, what are the other 40 or 50 or 60 hours filled with? What are you doing for all those other hours? And what we find is that a lot of it is unnecessary. Not all of it. Some of the meetings you really do have to attend. But what we find is that almost all of our clients can either shed or automate or outsource or somehow get out of doing at least 10 hours or 20 hours of that work so that they can begin to do their genius zone work again. When they do that, not only do they feel better, but they actually achieve much, much more than they had when they were trying to play whack-a-mole with 60 hours of work that others can do better, faster, or cheaper. So that's the whole point of scale, is that we simply can't operate and don't need to operate at 40 or 50 the way we did when we were 20.
Now, what's one quick win to start breaking free from burnout today for the audience?
The first thing that I would recommend is to try the R&R technique, and we'll send you a video if you want to. It's a very simple technique. My wife kids me because I've milked the 5-minute video out of a 5-second technique. That's one thing you can absolutely do. The other that we offer all of our potential clients or anyone who needs help is fastfixcall.com. And it's a free coaching session with either me or one of our coaches or consultants. We give you an online burnout assessment so that you can understand whether you have burnout or not. And then based on the assessment, suggest some interventions that you can use right now, this minute. It's a free call. We're not going to try to sell you anything. It's really intended to help people who need help right now. So it's called fastfixcall.com. And it's just 15 minutes of your life. But by assessing whether you have burnout or not and understanding specifically the form that it takes, then we can give you 2 or 3 interventions that you can start using right now today. And it's free.
I love that. Okay, we're going to be wrapping this up. So, Scott, what are your final words of wisdom today to the audience?
The main thing that I would say is that there is hope. When I was going through my own burnout, I really felt like there was no way forward. I couldn't keep going, but I couldn't not keep going. As exhausted as I was when I woke up in the morning, there was no way for me to stay in bed. That wasn't a possibility. On the other hand, if I didn't go to work and it felt like one day I would hit the wall and wouldn't be able to do it, then the wheels would really fall off. And I guess what I would tell you is that there is hope for a quick and permanent recovery from burnout, no matter how exhausted or overwhelmed or discouraged, I think is the feeling. You really can break through burnout quickly and permanently. We've worked with thousands of people and done all kinds of research on this, and it's absolutely possible. The only difficulty is that the solutions are different than the way that we solve most of our other problems. It's more about, it's a different approach. It's a counterintuitive approach, but it's simple and it's fast and it works.
Okay, so wherever you're watching or listening to this, I will be putting Scott's information. So if you have any questions, please reach out and ask Scott. So we have the burnout assessment. We've got the R&R. We've got your website for the call and the book. So the book will be part of that too. Can you just talk a little bit about the book?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we're really pleased about the book. It just published. You can get it at burnoutbreakthrough.com. And it tells you exactly our methodology from start to finish, every single step. And we didn't leave anything out. This is exactly the system that we give to our clients. And that's what I'd recommend. That's the fastest way to get started. And it is a complete answer.
Now, is it like a workbook or is it?
It's like a regular book, but there's definitely coursework involved.
Okay.
And it's, for example, there's a section about determining your own values and building your guiding principle system. And so, yeah, there are worksheets for that, but it's not a long book. It's only, I think it's 120 pages, and it's intentionally very boiled down and brief because people who are burned out want help right this second. And so we've tried to take everything out of it that doesn't hit the nail on the head.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Scott. Great information, because I'm like you. I've cycled burnout a few times, and that's why I'm here.
Yes, me too. Thank you so much, Denise. It's great to talk to you.
Yeah. So leaving you a gentle reminder to slow down and enjoy life, and I'll see you in the next episode.